There is nothing the political establishment will not do, no lie that they won't tell, to hold their prestige and power at your expense. And that's what's been happening. The Washington establishment and the financial and media corporations that fund it exist for only one reason: to protect and enrich itself. The establishment has trillions of dollars at stake in this election. As an example, just one single trade deal they'd like to pass involves trillions of dollars controlled by many countries, corporations, and lobbyists. For those who control the levers of power in Washington, and for the global special interest, they partner with these people that don't have your good in mind. Our campaign represents a true existential threat, like they haven't seen before. This is not simply another four-year election. This is a crossroads in the history of our civilization that will determine whether or not we, the people, reclaim control over our government. The political establishment that is trying to stop us is the same group responsible for our disastrous trade deals, massive illegal immigration, and economic and foreign policies that have bled our country dry. For them, it's war. And for them, nothing at all is out of bounds. This is a struggle for the survival of our nation. Believe me. This election will determine whether we're a free nation or whether we have only the illusion of democracy, but are in fact controlled by a small handful of global special interests rigging the system, and our system is rigged. This is reality. You know it, they know it, I know it, and pretty much the whole world knows it. The establishment and their media enablers wield control over this nation through means that are very well known. Anyone who challenges their control is deemed a sexist, a racist, a xenophobe, and morally deformed. They will attack you. They will slander you. They will seek to destroy your career and your family. They will seek to destroy everything about you, including your reputation. They will lie, 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 and then again, they will do worse than that. They will do whatever's necessary. The Clintons are criminals. Remember that. They're criminals. Our great civilization, here in America and across the civilized world, has come upon a moment of reckoning. We've seen it in the United Kingdom, where they voted to liberate themselves from global government and global trade deals and global immigration deals that have destroyed their sovereignty and have destroyed many of those nations. But the central base of world political power is right here in America. And it is our corrupt political establishment that is the greatest power behind the efforts at radical globalization and the disenfranchisement of working people. Their financial resources are virtually unlimited. Their political resources are unlimited. Their media resources are unmatched. And most importantly, the depths of their immorality is absolutely unlimited.
The New World Order wants to create a world currency, a world government, a world army, a world religion. And it's not of Christ, of Buddha, It's not of the Muslim faith. It is a satanic order.
Where institutions of freedom have lain dormant, the United Nations can offer them new life. These institutions play a crucial role in our quest for a new world order.
Their agenda is control. Control of our currency, control of our families, of our freedoms, of our religions. They want it all. There's nothing that you have, or ever had, or ever hope to have that they're not planning to taking away. They want it all. If you take a look at the backside of the dollar bill, it'll say Novus Ordo Seclorum, the new social order. And they have the pyramid. And that has nothing, not a damn thing to do with the United States of America. I was going to take a look at, a bill. And you can take a look on the backside of the bill and it'll say, here. You can hardly see it. But it's Novus Ordo Seclorum, the New World Order. It's what Hitler envisioned. It's on the backside of the United States dollar bill. The eye of the pyramid, also called the eye of Horus, is the eye of Lucifer. This is what we are facing.
Just to give you an idea of how black is white and topsy is turvy in relation to our perception of what's going on compared with what is. In New York Harbor is a lady holding a lighted torch, a Statue of Liberty. Statue of Liberty, land of the free. That's what most Americans, 99.9% of them, believe that stands for. In fact, that was given to New York Harbor by French Freemasons who knew that it was an Illuminati symbolism of, we control the show, we're telling you, but because you don't know the secret language and we've given you another version of it, freedom, you don't know what's going on.
The New World Order is housed right here at the United Nations. It is global government. Ein Volk, ein Reich, ein Führer. One world, one race, one ruler. It's what Rudolf Hess talked about when he introduced Adolf Hitler. This is Hitler's dream come true. This is a nightmare. This is the tombstone upon all sovereignty for all nations for all time. The United Nations must fall for freedom to live.
Where institutions of freedom have lain dormant, the United Nations can offer them new life. These institutions play a crucial role in our quest for a new world order. An order in which no nation must surrender one iota of its own sovereignty, an order characterized by the rule of law rather than the resort to force.
World War I, World War II were both created to bring about the United Nations. They're in the war business. Wars, like bridges, are engineered. This New World Order is in the war business. And to create the war, they can then say that they want peace. They couldn't, this would never have been built without the aid of World War I, without the aid of World War II.
Hundreds of anti-capitalist protesters are in Washington to try to disrupt meetings of the World Bank and the International Monetary Fund.
At every street corner around the IMF and the World Bank, the demonstrators have set up human chains to stop the meetings taking place.
What is the Bohemian Grove? Well, it's a kind of summer camp for the powerful.
Among its members, political figures like Gerald Ford, President Reagan, Vice President Bush, Richard Nixon is a Bohemian. Each year, guests like Henry Kissinger or Zbigniew Brzezinski address members on their areas of expertise.
For we are opposed around the world by a monolithic and ruthless conspiracy. It is a system which has conscripted vast human and material resources into the building of a tightly knit, highly efficient machine.
By the military-industrial complex.
Its preparations are concealed, not published. Its mistakes are buried, not headlined. Its dissenters are silenced, not praised.
We can find meaning and reward by serving some higher purpose than ourselves. A shining purpose, the illumination of 1,000 points of light.
No expenditure is questioned, No rumor is printed, no secret is revealed.
We have before us the opportunity to forge for ourselves and for future generations a new world order. The quest for the new world order is in part a challenge to keep the dangers of disorder at bay.
We were interested today to hear that more than 100 law enforcement officials in Mexico are having microchips implanted in their arms. The chips allow a person to be scanned, sort of like a cereal box at the supermarket checkout.
I think the most important thing is for Barack Obama.
I think his task will be to develop an overall strategy for America in this period when really a new world order can be created.
I think a new world order is emerging, and with it the foundations of a new and progressive era of international cooperation.
But the burdens of global citizenship continue to bind us together. In this new century, Americans and Europeans alike will be required to do more, not less. Partnership and cooperation among nations is not a choice.
You know, there is such a thing as insidious influence. Does it involve bribery? And does it involve some sort of psychological domination of individuals?
But what does a new world order mean for countries like ours?
A new world order.
No world order that elevates one nation or group of people over another will succeed.
It was a phrase that I often use myself, that we needed a new world order.
So it's going to be an inner ruling elite and then everyone else. And I got news for you. You're everyone else.
The whole concept of New World Order is something else. It really says that the state is God.
You take the roots of that organization and you find out that they created in all of the British dependencies what they call round table groups. Then around those little round table groups they created front groups.
We're getting to two levels of government here. One level of government where we have checks and balances, and a higher level of COG government where the constitutional authorities are not allowed to go.
The New World Order really is a tool for addressing a new world of possibilities.
This is the third leg of the New World Order.
Now, much has been said by the Secretary of State and others about a new world order, about a defining moment in history. I have no doubt about the potential of this moment to be defining in terms of history, but that definition can be negative as well as positive. And how negative or positive it will be will depend on what kind of new world order we really create. Can it truly be said that the United States of America, trading off better treatment to China for an abstention on a vote, cozying up to Syria with its record of support for terrorism, or making promises to other countries in exchange for a hold your coat, you go ahead and take the risks and casualties endorsement, can it truly be said that these create a new world order? Can it really be said that we're building a new world order when it's almost exclusively the United States who will be fighting in the desert? Not alone, but almost. Displaying pride and impatience and implementing what essentially amounts to a Pax Americana. Is that a new world order? Can it really be said that this is a true new world order when it lacks a true United Nations collective security effort with the full measure of international cooperation and burden sharing, which that should carry?
It was founded in 1832. Its original name was the Eulogian Club. Its creator was a merchant named William Huntington Russell, owner of Russell and Company, a transport company which was rumored to smuggle opium into China during the Opium Wars. The name Skull and Bones probably comes from a curious tradition. During their meetings in the campus chapel at Yale, the society used to hang a skull and two crossed shin bones upon the door as a warning that they should not be disturbed. The society was also known as the Order of Death, Corporation Star, or simply the Order.
How did I come to this knowledge? Well, up to 6 months ago, I denied that there was a conspiracy because, frankly, I couldn't prove one. I suspected a conspiracy, but I couldn't prove there was one until 6 months ago. Well, a little before 6 months ago, I received the catalog, which is the membership list of the society, all the way back to 1833, and I received some of their internal documents enough for me to put together the way they correspond with each other, the operations within the order, to some extent their problems, and to some extent their objectives.
Now this is the book, An Introduction to the Order, by Anthony C. Sutton. It has a skull and bones on the front and 322.
What is Skull and Bones, the secret society?
It's so secret we can't talk about it.
What does that mean for America? The conspiracy theorists are going to go
I'm
wild.
sure they are. I don't know. I haven't seen the web.
Number 322?
First of all, he's not the nominee. And, look, I look forward...
Are you prepared to lose?
No, I'm not going to lose.
You both were members of Skull and Bones, a secret society at Yale. What does that tell us?
Not much, because it's a secret.
Is there a secret handshake? Is there a secret code?
I wish there were something secret I could manifest.
322, a secret number?
There are all kinds of secrets, Tim, but one thing is not a secret. I disagree with this president's direction that he's taking the country. We can do a better job, and I intend to do it.
And we'll be watching. Be safe on the campaign trail. John Kerry, thanks for joining us. And we'll be right back.
The tomb has a dark, labyrinth-like layout that spans 3 floors and an attic. It compromises a number of halls and secret cabinets, chambers with mannequins in full armor, candlesticks, old photos, flags and manuscripts, and a sinister collection of bones, supposedly belonging to historical figures, including the skulls of Mexican revolutionary Pancho Villa and the Indian chief Geronimo, and even that of Panamanian dictator General Omar Torrijos. In the keep of the labyrinth, there is a vault with the enigmatic number 322 on the door. Inside, there are just 2 chairs and a table. This was where the candidates are said to meet Madame, a skeleton that is supposed to be that of Madame Pompadour.
The 322 is an identification. The order has a temple on the Yale campus.
Temple?
A temple, yes. It's a building, maybe this 50, 60 feet by 40 feet, maybe 40 feet high. There's no windows, 2 big steel doors. We know what the temple looks like because back in 1880s, a number of Yale students became a little unhappy about what was going on inside this temple. When they went by it at midnight, sometimes they heard strange noises and all kinds of rumors on the Yale campus as to what this might be.
Then to the right, you have a hedge, and then you have an evergreen tree. If you follow that line straight back, courtyard's in there.
Ah, okay.
So
that's where they have the ceremonies in
the outdoor part of it. Part of it was indoor. So we only got to see the outdoor part.
Right.
We only got and to listen to the outdoor part. God only knows what went on indoors.
And what did you hear? What was it you know? You managed to get this unique
it was
access to it.
disgusting. It was gross. I mean, they were pretending to murder people. And
What was the tone of it, though? Was it jokey or was it quite...
No, it wasn't jokey at all. It was sick. It's about the only way I can describe it. It was sick.
What you're hearing is the first recording ever made of the Skull and Bones initiation ceremony. It has never been broadcast before. 15 new members of the club are being introduced into the macabre rituals of Skull and Bones by the senior students who are about to graduate. The club has what some might see as a strange fascination with death, skulls and bones. There's the chants too, difficult to hear first of all, but including the devil equals death and death equals death. These rituals have been honed over centuries, giving the society a weird set of traditions, rules and secrets. For example, initiates are known as neophytes, outsiders are called barbarians, and the number 322 is sacred.
Critics of Skull and Bones insist that the society is not originally American, but rather an offshoot of some German right-wing order. This could well be true. Its founder, William Russell, did indeed live for some time in Germany before attending to his senior year at Yale. and it was actually on returning to the USA that he established the fraternity. Always according to its critics, the number 322, the order's identifying number, hides a coded message. The 32 represents the year of its foundation, 1832, and the additional 2 stands for the fact that it's the second chapter within an international order. Alexandra Robbins, a Yale graduate and author of a book on the subject, stated that the society owns a valuable collection of Nazi objects and memorabilia, and eats its dinners off Hitler's private silver service. A large part of their liturgy is written in German. Who was the fool? Who was the wise man, beggar or king? Whether poor or rich, all's the same in death.
There was a break-in to the temple, and the students who broke in cataloged what they found, and they made a drawing, a design of the interior of the temple. And 3 of the rooms are numbered. One is 322, one is 323, and one is 324. 322 is also, I suspect, the chapter number. And also in correspondence between members, they conclude their correspondence where you and I would conclude yours truly or yours sincerely. They conclude yours in 322. Why 322? There are several theories for this. One is that the order originated with Demosthenes, the Greek, in 322 BC. That's one theory. Another one is that it stems from the founding date in the United States, which was 1832. So really we have the last 2 numbers, 32, the second chapter founded in 1832. The skull and crossbones are prominent in their ceremonies, initiation ceremonies.
This is a symbol of death. Now, why would they take a symbol of death?
Yes, from what I understand, when a new member is initiated, that would be in the senior year at Yale, he's placed within a coffin.
Oh my.
And now we only know this from the Yalegate papers. These, I call it Yalegate. And from the photographs we have of members inside the temple, many of these photographs are the 15s sitting around a table, and they have this skull and the crossbones sitting on the table in front of them. It is the symbol of death, and it has been called the Brotherhood of Death, and I think it probably more adequately should be called the Brotherhood of Death. So what I've had to do is look at the history, the biographies of the leading members of the order, and reconstruct their career, and see if there's a common pattern in their careers. While doing that, I came across some interesting documents. Some members apparently are not too happy once they become involved with this after 10 or 20 years. One member in particular left a memorandum. He wrote it in 1932. It was buried away in his papers. I don't think anybody found it before I did. And it was a 6-page memorandum on the order, naming some of the members, and said it was the most sordid thing ever happened in the history of man. So, but to come back to my point, I have to reconstruct the objectives. What are the objectives? In the words of one member, might is right. If you have the power, you use it to achieve your objectives. What is the objective? As you look at the histories of individual members, it can only be one thing: to acquire power, to keep power, to use power for their own purposes.
In 1930, Prescott Sheldon Bush, father of President George H. and grandfather of President George W., a member of the Skull and Bones class of 1917, and president of the Union Banking Corporation, engaged in a number of profitable business deals with Fritz Thyssen, the German steel tycoon who supplied Hitler's war machine. The UBC was closed by President Truman during the Second World War under the Trading with the Enemy Act. In other words, for doing business with the Nazis. Apart from Prescott Bush, several other directors of the Union Banking Corporation in New York were also 1917 bonesmen, including E. Rowland Harriman and Ellery Sedgwick James. In 1938, Bush, by then executive associate of Brown Brothers Harriman, issued a loan to Hitler's Germany to enable the latter to import American Standard Oil fuel. Skull and Bones membership certainly has its privileges. At least 3 American presidents were or are bonesmen: George W. Bush, his father George H. Bush, and William Taft. The proposition that this small club of the well-to-do pulls the strings of American power, and through it those of the whole world, by placing its associates in key power positions, is supported by substantial evidence. The elections of 2004 saw the almost impossible come true. Both the Republican candidate George W. Bush and his Democrat rival John F. Kerry were members of Skull and Bones. That's to say, prior to running as representatives of parties that supposedly propound opposite political visions, they had both sworn allegiance to the same mysterious principles. And what's worse, they share secrets that are not known to their own constituents. Each year, only 15 students entering their senior year at the University of Yale are admitted. The candidates must have been tapped by those senior classmen of Yale University who make up the current membership. The criterion for selection also includes the candidate's potential to increase the power and prestige of the society. 2 votes against the candidate are enough for him to be rejected. During their initiation, candidates must recount all their sexual exploits. Finally, they are expected to perform various oaths, kiss some feet, and drink blood. They then have to lie naked in a coffin, and, after masturbating in full view of the others, swear to never reveal their membership of the order. The candidates are then introduced to their future companions, who wear masks for the occasion. Uncle Toby, the Knights, the Small Devil, Don Quixote, and the Pope. Their ceremony ends with a grand party that lasts for hours.
Breed, exactly.
Now, Tony, what has this breed done? What are their chief accomplishments in molding domestic and foreign policy and actual events in American history since their founding at Yale?
One is they have acquired enormous political and financial power. You'll find representatives of the order in politics.
What have they done with this power? What has happened to America that would not have happened had they not been the order?
Creation of war and revolution.
Specifically, which ones? You have documents on that?
The third book in this series, which I'm bringing out, takes 2 wars and 1 revolution. Well, 2 revolutions in 1 war. World War II, the Bolshevik Revolution, and the rise of Hitler, which I call a revolution in Germany. We can find the order behind the Russian Revolution, the Bolshevik Revolution. We can find behind the rise of Hitler. We can find in the maintenance of both of these systems, the transfer of technology to both.
Since you've already proven that Wall Street is behind the Bolshevik Revolution and the rise of Hitler, now you're proving that the order is behind Wall Street.
Exactly.
Now, who's the key figure in the order or figures that mold Wall Street?
In order of dominance, Averell Harriman, partner in Brown Brothers Harriman. Stanley of Morgan Stanley. It used to be J.P. Morgan, then it became Morgan Stanley. Those 2 are the key.
Now, what did the order want to accomplish in the Bolshevik Revolution?
You create opposing forces which you place in conflict. Out of conflict, you've got profit, you've got political power, and you can direct history. And if you look at the writings, for example, of the Trilateral Commission, they talk openly in the Trilateral Commission about managing conflict, not solving conflicts, but managing conflicts. Conflict management. That's the cry.
So they got the profit, the power, and the management.
Mm-hmm.
Where do they want to steer history through the Bolshevik Revolution?
They wanted to set up, and they did, two opposing forces. Out of that came World War II. There were logical steps in the process. They used the same bank, Guaranteed Trust Company, as the conduit for the financing of Hitler, and also as a conduit for financing, and also the early days of the Russian Revolution. In fact, in Russia, Soviet Russia in 1923, a vice president of Guaranteed Trust Company was the foreign director of the Roscombank, which was the first Soviet overseas bank that was set up. They were that close in those days. You'll get a very close relationship between the early Hitler days and members of the order, which is in the third book.
By the end of the 1980s, the scandal concerning the Bank of Commerce and Credit International was making the headlines. The BCCI was accused of laundering drug money and financing terrorist operations. The scandal tarnished the reputation of the US government, since the bank operated freely in America and was a regular contributor to political campaigns. The administration of Bonesman George H. Bush blocked the investigation, which had in any case been entrusted to a Senate commission chaired by Bonesman John Kerry. The BCCI was absorbed by more respectable banks, and the subject was never revived. The government of the world's only superpower is packed with bonesmen. George W. Bush named 11 bonesman officials in his first government. Add to this various senators, congressmen, and chief justices, directors of the CIA, the Federal Reserve, and directors of banks such as J.P. Morgan Chase and Morgan Stanley Dean Witter. The American media is little different. Among others, Time and Newsweek magazines, in theory competitors, were both founded by bonesmen. The oldest and most influential families also belong to this select club. Bush, Bundy, Harriman, Lord, Phelps, Rockefeller, Taft, Whitney. All of them have undergone the odd ritual of initiation. All have spilled their darkest secrets. All have been ritually humiliated in front of their peers. And all of them owe loyalty to the order. It is estimated that there are some 800 bonesmen alive today, around half of them active and in key positions in the American economy and political establishment.
Of America happen to be their own best interests as well.
I have never seen anything in their literature which leads me to believe that they have our individual rights in their hearts. What I do see in the literature and in the documents is a ruthless drive to acquire power for themselves.
Peer-reviewed and published.
I know, and I've got people looking at it.
Have you had a chance to look at the cover
I
letter?
have not personally, but they are looking at the paper you gave me.
Okay. If we give you, say, a week or two, can we get back to you after that?
Absolutely.
Excellent. It's very important because it is evidence of treason.
I hear you.
You made Building 7 comments, Mr. Kerry, before when you said...
Thank you very much.
...in a controlled fashion.
I do know that that wall, I remember, was in danger, and I think that they made a decision based on the danger that it had of destroying other things, that they did it in a controlled fashion.
You denied making those statements before, but in a bookstore you said that Building 7, which was not hit by an airplane, came down in 6 seconds, looked like it came down in a controlled fashion.
Building 7.
I mean, you made some very interesting comments on Building 7. And then you denied making those comments when we interviewed you in New York.
Yeah, can you clear that up? Because Building 7 is such an anomaly.
I don't have a record. I'd like to see specifically what I said. I don't have...
Did you see the building come down?
I don't have...
No. You said that this building came down in a controlled fashion, like they took it down.
No, I don't think I said... I'd like to see specifically what I said.
What is your feeling on how it came down? Let's start fresh.
Guys, I'm not into running in the hallway interviews and these kinds of things.
We have very few opportunities to talk to a man like you.
Let me take a look at what the transcript says, and we'll go from there. Okay?
Fair enough. Thank you. Thank you for your time.
Thanks. Thank you very much. Thank you. All right, you got it?
Sir, hand right here. So can you comment on your Building 7 comment, saying that it was brought down? And then NIST still doesn't have an explanation of Building 7. There's not 11 heroes who have testimony.
I don't have any idea what you're talking about.
Building 7, sir?
Sir, please put that away. Sir,
Why don't you sign that for me?
Thank you very much.
Would you like to sign that?
Sir, you cannot videotape.
Would you like to take that information with you?
Sir. Okay.
So, Mr. Kerry, can you clarify your statements on Building 7? There's not 11 heroes that support your statement that it did come down in a controlled fashion, sir.
Kevin McPadden, a first responder, confirmed.
Senator, about 1 year to this day in Texas, you said that building number 7, World Trade Center number 7, looks like it went down. They did it in a controlled fashion, sir. Could you please articulate what you meant by the Salomon Brothers World Trade Center number 7 was a controlled demolition and they had done it in a controlled fashion?
First responder Kevin McPadden.
You made that statement at the store called Book People in Austin, Texas on April 21st of 2007 when you were being questioned about the World Trade Center collapse of the Salomon Brothers building.
Thank you very much.
Senator Kerry, you cannot ignore these questions, Senator Kerry. Yes, you did. It is on YouTube, Senator.
They made a decision based on the danger that it had of destroying other things, that they did it in a controlled fashion.
You are on file with testimony, Senator. You must clarify your remarks, Senator. Was it a controlled demolition, Senator Kerry? Skull and Bones. We know what it's about, Senator. We know everything about you.
As if a demolition team set off when you see the old demolitions of these old buildings.
It looks like one of those scenes of an old building being purposely
encourage people to go and do the same thing and go to their police, tell them about today, give them the evidence. West Sussex Police have said they're investigating it, which they're obliged to do because the BBC had prior knowledge of a terrorist event, which under, I think it's section 38 of the Terrorism Act, they should have reported, which they didn't. And they've since given us this impossible flannel about World Trade Center 7 collapsing due to an office fire, which even in the NIST report says fell at free fall speed for 8 floors in 2.5 seconds. Now that is absolutely impossible without a controlled demolition being involved. Absolutely impossible. There's no arguments around it. Don't let anyone else tell you otherwise because they're saying Isaac Newton is wrong.
Can you believe what you have been seeing on CNN today, ladies and gentlemen? Can you believe it? Supposedly, a CNN reporter found Osama bin Laden, took a television camera crew with him, went into Osama bin Laden's hideout, interviewed him and his top leadership, his top lieutenants and colonels and generals in their hideout. This is a CNN reporter with a camera crew. And he came out and told everybody, within 3 weeks, Osama bin Laden is going to attack the United States and Israel. Now, don't you think that's kind of strange, folks? You see, because the largest intelligence apparatus in the world, with the biggest budget in the history of the world, has been looking for Osama bin Laden for years and years and years, and can't find him. A reporter from CNN and his little camera crew got in to Osama bin Laden's secret hideout and conducted an interview. If you don't believe me, tune into CNN. They're probably running it right now as I'm speaking. And if you believe it, you are one of the stupidest jerks that ever lived on the face of this earth. And whatever is going to happen that they're going to blame on Osama bin Laden, don't you even believe it. When in hell are all you people going to wake up?
So if 9/11 was really an inside job, then who are the people inside that did it? Well, we can start by looking at some of the people inside the buildings that were targeted and destroyed on 9/11. In the impact zone of the North Tower was a company called Marsh & McLennan, which at the time was the world's largest insurance brokerage company. One of Marsh's executives was a guy named L. Paul Bremer, who was also the chairman of the Congressional National Commission on Terrorism from 1999 to 2000, and the U.S. ambassador at large for counterterrorism from 1986 to 1989. Instead of going to work on the day of 9/11 and dying inside the towers with hundreds of his employees, Bremer decided to go on MSNBC and tell the world that Osama bin Laden was behind the attacks and possibly Iraq and Iran, and then he demanded
the most severe military response we can come up with.
L. Paul Bremer was called away from Marsh in 2003 to become the Iraq occupation governor, a role he has been widely criticized for. So Bremer not only worked inside the buildings, but had offices directly in the impact zone of the South Tower where Flight 175 would hit. He missed work on 9/11 to give us the official story on national television, and went on to be the Iraq occupation governor. You really can't get more connected to 9/11 than that. Oh wait, you can, sorry. I forgot to mention that Bremer was also the former manager for Kissinger Associates. He was a member of the board for Akzo Nobel, the parent of International Paint Company, which produced a fireproofing application for skyscrapers called Interchar. Bremer was also on the International Advisory Board for the Japanese mining and machinery company Komatsu, which at the time had been involved in a joint venture agreement with Dresser Industries, the oil services intelligence front where Prescott Bush Sr. and George H.W. Bush got their start with Neil Mallon. Anyway, the Komatsu Dresser mining division operated from 1988 to 1997, and in July 1996 it patented a nanothermite demolition device that could, quote, demolish a concrete structure at high efficiency while preventing a secondary problem due to noise, flying chips and dust, and the like. As many of you know, residues of thermite, a highly energetic chemical mixture, have been confirmed in samples of World Trade Center dust, and the use of thermite at the World Trade Center was also revealed by environmental data. See the description for more links and sources. But wait a minute. It would have taken tons of this stuff. How could they get it inside the buildings and put it into place without anyone finding out? This would have taken hundreds of people. Someone would have talked by now. It just doesn't make any sense. Well, who ran security for these buildings? Marvin Bush's company Securicom Stratesec did, up until 1998, when that role was handed off to Kroll Associates. Yet Stratesec still retained security contracts that didn't expire until the day of 9/11. Both these companies have a suspicious cast of characters working for them. Bush's cousin, Wirt Dexter Walker III, was the CEO of Stratesec with a long history as a manager for CIA front companies, such as Glor Forgan. The corporate operating officer of Stratesec was a guy named Barry McDaniel, who came from BDM International, where he was a vice president of material distribution and management systems. He also had a history of involvement with black projects. Securicom Stratesec also ran security at Dulles International Airport, where Flight 77 into the Pentagon was hijacked out of, and also had contracts with United Airlines. They also ran security at Los Alamos National Laboratories during the time period that nanothermite was first being developed there. Then there's Kroll Associates, also known as the CIA of Wall Street. Kroll's managing director was a guy named Jerome Hauer, who, like L. Paul Bremer, survived the 9/11 attacks by going on national television to give us the first accounts of the official story. Before anyone knew it was happening, these guys apparently had it all figured out. In addition to being managing director for Kroll, Jerome Hauer was the national security advisor with the National Institute of Health, which managed the government response to the anthrax attacks shortly after 9/11. On the day of 9/11, Hauer advised the White House to start taking Cipro, an antibiotic effective against anthrax, and then strangely a week later, 2 senators and several people in the media who had been calling for an investigation into the 9/11 attacks were mailed anthrax and told to shut up. apparently by members of Al-Qaeda, who later turned out to be a bioweapons researcher at U.S. AMRID in Fort Detrick, Maryland, named Stephen Hatfill, who had worked with Jerome Hauer for a company called SAIC. Scientific Applications International Corporation, a defense contractor with expertise in thermite-related technologies, played a large part in the NIST World Trade Center investigation. A few other names and companies inside the Twin Towers also worthy of further investigation include Craig Stapleton, who is married to Bush's cousin Dorothy Walker Bush. Stapleton was the president of Marsh Real Estate Advisors from 1982 to 2001. He was a member of the board of directors for Cendant, that was charged with massive accounting fraud in 1998, and went on to join Winston Partners, a privately owned investment firm founded in 1993 and led by George W. Bush's brother Marvin. Other very powerful and well-connected people worked in senior management at Marsh. These included Stephen Friedman, a senior principal at Marsh Capital and former partner at Goldman Sachs, who later became George W. Bush's top economic advisor. Friedman was also a member of the Brookings Institution, the Bilderberg Group, the Foreign Intelligence Advisory Board, and the board at In-Q-Tel, the investment firm founded by the CIA in 1998. In-Q-Tel invests in state-of-the-art technologies related to defense and intelligence work, including nano and chemical technologies, according to its website. In another interesting coincidence, Friedman belonged through Cornell University to a secret society called Quill and Dagger, the membership of which includes Paul Wolfowitz, Sandy Berger, and Stephen Hadley. Wolfowitz, the neocon Deputy Secretary of Defense in the Bush administration, was the author in 1992 of the Wolfowitz Doctrine of preemptive warfare. He also made comments about a surprise-like Pearl Harbor months before 9/11 and met with Pakistani ISI General Mahmoud Ahmed in the week before 9/11. Berger, the national security advisor to President Clinton, was later caught stealing documents from the 9/11 Commission investigation. Berger was also the boss of White House counterterrorism czar Richard Clarke, and together with Hadley, who was Condoleezza Rice's deputy, was responsible for delaying or obstructing Clarke's plans to stop al-Qaeda in January of 2001. Jeffrey Greenberg resigned from Marsh & McLennan after being accused of serious financial crimes. The first plane of 9/11 flew directly into his company's secure computer room in the North Tower. Jeffrey Greenberg is a member of the Brookings Institution and the Trilateral Commission. Jeffrey Greenberg rose quickly through management at Marsh, having come there directly from AIG in 1995, and then becoming CEO just 4 years later. At Brookings, Greenberg hobnobbed with Lee Hamilton, co-chair of the 9/11 Commission. There's also Jim Pierce, another Bush cousin, who was managing director of Aon Corporation, who, according to the NIST report, modified unknown sections of Floor 83 in the South Tower in 1997. Jim Pierce had arranged a meeting on the 105th floor of the South Tower for that morning. Pierce survived that day, despite the fact that 12 people came to the meeting in the South Tower and 11 of them died. The location of the meeting had been changed the night before to the Millennium Hotel, where Pierce watched the South Tower as it was hit by the aircraft. Apparently, the meeting attendees were not all notified of the change in location. Another interesting character is Joseph Kasputys, of Baseline Financial Service, which occupied the impact zone of the South Tower on floors 77 and 78, where United Airlines 175 impacted. Kasputys has a history of being well connected to the highest levels of government, as well as to the defense and intelligence industries. Kasputys worked from 1972 to 1977 for the U.S. Department of Commerce and Defense. He was also the deputy director of Nixon's White House task force that dealt with the Arab oil embargo of 1973, and was instrumental in the creation of the Department of Energy. Kasputys went on to run a large corporation called Primark that had offices in both towers on 9/11. One of the subsidiaries of Primark, the Analytical Sciences Corporation, TASC, worked with so-called black or top-secret programs. TASC also worked closely with the National Institute of Standards and Technology. Kasputys was also a member of the Logistics Management Institute, LMI, whose members included Paul Kaminsky of In-Q-Tel and General Dynamics, Charles DiBona of Halliburton, Skull and Bones member Joseph Samuel Nye, and Michael Daniels of Scientific Applications International Corporation. LMI's self-proclaimed role is advancing the science of government. Kasputys' connections to the DOE from 1977 through at least 1997 are interesting, considering that the DOE was developing thermite ignition devices as early as 1983. Joseph Caspudes went on to become the CEO of Baseline Financial Services, which was directly in the impact zone on the 78th floor of the South Tower. According to NIST, Caspudes Baseline Financial modified the southeast corner of floor 78 in 1999, exactly where the aircraft hit on 9/11. Floors 77 and 78 were upgraded for fireproofing in June and April of 1998, respectively. Another company of interest on floor 91, just above the impact zone for the South Tower, was Washington Group International. This company was known primarily as a construction and mining firm, and it had just acquired Raytheon Engineers in July of 2000. In 1996, Washington took over Morrison Knudsen, an engineering and construction firm that had a history of working on large-scale projects around the world, including in China, Iran, Afghanistan, and Saudi Arabia. The Army Corps of Engineers hired Morrison Knudsen to demolish over 200 buildings in 1995. One of the DOE facilities for which Washington was responsible well before 9/11 was the Savannah River site near Aiken, South Carolina. In February of 1997, Lawrence Livermore National Labs and the Savannah River site signed an agreement of cooperation to share technology. Savannah went on to add developing sol gel technology for fuels and other applications to its portfolio. Sol gel technology is utilized by Lawrence Livermore National Laboratories for making nanothermites. In another coincidence, Savannah River Technology staff participated in the search and rescue operations at Ground Zero by providing unique tools. Just before 9/11, Washington was going through a tough time financially and sought Chapter 11 bankruptcy protection. Securities and Exchange Commission documents show that Washington made court-ordered pre-petition payments as part of these proceedings to a number of companies, including Komatsu. Washington also made payments to Greenhorn and Omara, whose employee, Teresa McAllister, was a lead author of the FEMA and NIST reports on the World Trade Center disaster, and to Sumitomo Bank, which was closely allied with Komatsu. Building 7 was a 47-story federal office building in the World Trade Center site, which collapsed at 5:20 p.m. on the afternoon of 9/11. This building was home to the CIA, in fact, the largest CIA headquarters outside of Langley, Virginia. It also housed offices for the Secret Service and the Securities and Exchange Commission. One of the most interesting tenants, however, was then Mayor Giuliani's Office of Emergency Management and its Emergency Command Center on the 23rd floor. This floor received $15 million worth of renovations, including independent and secure air and water supplies, and bullet and bomb-resistant windows designed to withstand 200-mile-per-hour winds. Mayor Giuliani was a former U.S. prosecutor for the South District of New York from 1983 to 1989, who was in charge of investigating the terrorist financing Bank of Credit and Commerce International. After he left his job as a prosecutor to start a political career, he worked for a law firm called White & Case that actually represented BCCI. So he went from prosecuting the BCCI to working for a law firm which defended the BCCI. This was likely his foot in the door of this underground corporate criminal network. Giuliani would later help to destroy all the crime scene evidence from Ground Zero. Giuliani's sidekick on 9/11 was Police Commissioner Bernard Kerik, who appeared to be coaching some of Rudy's actions that day, keeping him away from the media and even answering questions for him about explosives in the buildings. In fact, Bernard Kerik gave us the first official government pronouncement that no explosives were involved in the destruction of the World Trade Center buildings. Kerik's department was also the same one that found that pristine, completely undamaged hijacker's passport, which survived a plane impact, and Fireball, which destroyed 2 titanium black boxes and 3 towers. Yeah, Kerik would later receive a nomination from President Bush to become Director of Homeland Security, which he declined for personal and political reasons, and instead took a job training the Iraqi police force in Iraq alongside L. Paul Bremer. Both men are credited for turning Iraq into the unwinnable quagmire it is today. In February of 2010, Kerik was sentenced to 4 years in federal prison for conspiracy and fraud charges, unrelated to the crimes of 9/11, unfortunately, but it still goes to show you what kind of person he is. Definitely the kind of person you'd want inside the New York City police force during a staged event like 9/11. And lastly, we have the Pentagon. It's certainly peculiar, to say the least, that al-Qaeda terrorists hell-bent on destroying the USA would not crash their plane into the north wing of the Pentagon, where all the most important offices were, like Donald Rumsfeld, John Ashcroft, etc., and that they would instead choose to target the one section of the Pentagon that had most recently been refurbished to withstand missile impacts. It's also interesting to note that the company which completed the $258 million refurbishment to Wedge 1 of the Pentagon was also hired as a contractor to clean up Ground Zero in New York City. Wedge 1 also coincidentally housed the Pentagon's Budget Analyst Office, where DoD staffers were working on the mystery of the $2.3 trillion that was reported missing by Defense Secretary Donald Rumsfeld in a press conference the day before 9/11. The Pentagon's comptroller in charge of that money at the time was an interesting fellow named Dov Zakheim, a member of the Council on Foreign Relations, the International Institute for Strategic Studies, and a contributor to the neocon think tank Project for the New American Century. Zakheim helped write the PNAC document Rebuilding America's Defenses, in which he is credited for the line which states, "Further, the process of transformation, even if it brings revolutionary change, is likely to be a long one, absent some catastrophic and catalyzing event, like a new Pearl Harbor." Several members of the Bush administration, including President Bush himself, would later refer to 9/11 as a new Pearl Harbor. If anything, the individuals and organizations outlined in this video are at least as suspicious as the 19 hijackers themselves.
I don't think anybody could have predicted that they would try to use an airplane as a missile, a hijacked airplane as a missile.
Nobody in our government, at least, and I don't think the prior government that could envision flying airplanes into buildings.
No specific threat involving really domestic operation or involving what happened, obviously, the city's airliner and so forth.
There were no warning signs that I'm aware of.
USA Today reports that in the 2 years before the attacks on September the 11th, NORAD conducted exercises using hijacked airliners as weapons. And one target was the World Trade Center.
The North American Aerospace Defense Command is charged with defending North America's airspace. On the morning of September 11, 2001, Vice President Dick Cheney was in control of NORAD. This was the first time in U.S. history that a president or vice president was in direct control of the military agency. NORAD was founded in 1957, and generals always had the power to shoot down or intercept hijacked aircraft. But on June 1st, 2001, just 3 months before 9/11, Dick Cheney ordered Donald Rumsfeld to allow him to take control of NORAD itself and the shoot-down procedure, and remove that power from the generals so they could do nothing. Here is a copy of the memorandum from Rumsfeld to the Joint Chiefs, telling them they no longer have any authority. An Associated Press article in August of 2002 reported that the CIA just so happened to be running a drill on the morning of 9/11 of flying jets in the World Trade Center and Pentagon. Then senior FAA officials ordered air traffic controllers to shred the tapes from 9/11 in violation of federal law. AP learned of the drills because at a Homeland Security function after 9/11, they bragged about it. Oh, we had foresight. We were running drills that very morning. Then USA Today reported that drills held weeks before 9/11 included targets that were the Pentagon and World Trade Center. Biggest holes in their argument is the fact that they never heard of a plan to fly hijacked jets into landmarks on the East Coast.
We're going to take a closer look tonight at another example of where, despite the conventional wisdom, there were people in the United States who actually were preparing to defend against the kind of attacks which occurred here on 9/11. The North American Aerospace Defense Command, NORAD for short, has been defending the skies over the U.S. and Canada for almost 50 years, 46 to be precise. USA Today reports that in the 2 years before the attacks on September the 11th, NORAD conducted exercises using hijacked airliners as weapons. And one target was the World Trade Center.
We knew he hated us. But there was nobody in our government, at least, and I don't think the prior government that could envision flying airplanes into buildings on such a massive scale.
But that turns out not to be true. U.S. military planners did envision and practice those very scenarios. As reported by USA Today, the North American Aerospace Defense Command, NORAD, conducted exercises with fighter jets. simulating hijacked planes flown into the World Trade Center in the 2 years before the attack.
And so then I saw Condoleezza Rice get up on TV and say, we had never thought, we had never heard. Why, that's a ridiculous conspiracy theory to say that.
Pentagon planners also envisioned the attack on the Pentagon 5 months before it happened.
The Pentagon had a drill in November of 2000 simulating a hijacked jet being flown to the Pentagon. So between all the drills before 9/11 and the drill in the morning of 9/11, air traffic controllers thought that it was a simulation.
Hijacked aircraft headed towards New York.
Is this real world or exercise?
No, this is not an exercise, not a test.
September 11th, 2001. NORAD is in the middle of a number of military exercises. The first, Vigilant Guardian, is described as an exercise that would pose an imaginary crisis to North American air defense outposts nationwide. The second, Northern Vigilance, moved fighter jets to Canada and Alaska to fight off an imaginary Russian fleet. 3 F-16s from Washington, D.C.'s National Guard at Andrews Air Force Base, 15 miles from the Pentagon, are flown 180 nautical miles away for a training mission in North Carolina. This left 14 fighter jets to protect the entire United States.
I wanted to focus just a moment on the Presidential Emergency Operating Center. You were there for a good part of the day. I think you were there with the Vice President. And we had that order given, I think it was by the President, that authorized the shooting down of commercial aircraft that were suspected to be controlled by terrorists. Were you there when that order was given?
No, I was not. I was made aware of it during the time that the airplane coming in to the Pentagon. There was a young man who would come in and say to the Vice President, the plane is 50 miles out. The plane is 30 miles out. And when it got down to the plane is 10 miles out, the young man also said to the Vice President, do the orders still stand? And the Vice President turned and whipped his neck around and said, of course the orders still stand. Have you heard anything to the contrary? Well, at the time I didn't know what all that meant. And
the flight you're referring to is the
flight that came into the Pentagon.
The fact that they were holding war games on the day that mimicked the actual attack scenario in every aspect, and then that afterwards they claimed we couldn't have imagined that such a thing would happen, although it was exactly the scenario that we were rehearsing. Hijackings, crashes into buildings, an emergency in New York City, all this was being rehearsed on the day as part of a plan. So when they say we couldn't have imagined it, they're lying.
We've now found out that there were 15 exercises going on that day involving all the fighter jets in the northeastern portion of the United States. What are the odds of that occurring?
I'm supposed to believe is some kind of coincidence. There was also an anti-terrorist drill going on 7/7. And again, just like 9/11, they were talking about attacks on the same targets, the same kind of tube stations, and exactly the same time as the actual attack happened.
How many of you know that NORAD stood down for over an hour and 25 minutes, but if your Cessna gets off course for 5 minutes, they're going to launch F-16s on you? Remember Payne Stewart, the golfer? 15 minutes after his jet got off track, they had F-16s all around him. But on 9/11, in the most controlled airspace in the world, they could do nothing about 4 jets. But it gets worse. Guess why NORAD stood down? The average people in the military are good folks. They were told it was a drill because the Associated Press reported, and the CIA's own website admits, that on the morning of 9/11, the CIA was running a drill of flying hijacked jets into the World Trade Center and Pentagon. It was just a coincidence. At 8:30 in the morning, there was a drill of the exact same thing happening, and so NORAD stood down.
My thesis is Abel Danger are the terrorist controllers. Mohammed Atta,
He can't get through the day. He's got to have money. He's got to have help. Terrorist controllers, case officers, babysitters for Atta. The main consumer of Able Danger intelligence is Major General Jeffrey Lambert, Special Forces. And he tells them, he says, look, they have a chart with all these Al-Qaeda characters, including Atta, before the fact. And he gets these yellow Post-it notes, and he puts one on Atta's face, saying, that reminds you, you can't share information about him. So they knew exactly who these people were, of course, because they were telling them what to do. Every year there's a drill called Able Warrior, and the theme is only one thing, anti-terrorism. Now if you look at the way that they do this, they have drills in binary pairs. One side pretends to be the defenders, and the other side pretends to be the attackers, okay? So if Able Warrior are the defenders, anti-terrorism, what's Able Danger? Able Danger is a troop of attackers to be used to simulate attacks during anti-terror drills. In other words, those double agents are there as actors, if you like, in normal drills, but then at a certain point, wham, the drill goes live and something happens.
I know you said there'll be a time for politics, but you've also said you wanted to change the tone of Washington. Howard Dean recently seemed to muse aloud whether you had advanced knowledge of 9/11. Do you agree or disagree with the RNC that this kind of rhetoric borders on political hate speech?
Yeah. Look, there's time for politics. And, you know, it's time for politics. And it's an absurd insinuation.
In that case, sir, can I follow up on something unrelated?
And then you gonna mess with that nasty ass trap?
Maisha, I never noticed she was a man. I never did.
I believe that our education, like such as in South Africa and the Iraq, everywhere like such as.
Platform 8 for the 2228 Southern service to Eastbourne via Lewis. Please join first to...
One option, placing a tracking microchip under a service member's skin. Former Special Operations Officer.
And if you hear the shouting, it's a group of demonstrators who come. 9/11 was an inside job.
It's no longer a theory. What I'm about to say is fact. The secret organizations of the world power elite are no longer secret. They have planned and are now leading us into a one-world communist government.
Well, there have been extraordinary scenes in Berlin tonight as thousands of people gathered to hear Barack Obama deliver key foreign policy speech on his current European tour. The Democratic presidential hopeful laid out his vision for America's place in a new world order, in a new world order, in a new world order.
It's not a new idea. President Bush talked about it back in 1991.
It is a big idea, a new world order.
President Bush said, and it's a phrase that I often use myself, that we needed a new world order.
There's a need for a new world order.
I call upon all states to join ranks in order to found the new world order of the 21st century.
We have before us the opportunity to forge for ourselves and for future generations a new world order. When we are successful, and we will be, we have a real chance at this new world order.
And people talked then, in 1990, of a new world order. And the question for us is how we meet and master all these challenges to ensure that Britain enhances its competitiveness in the process and realizes what I believe is our destiny of success in this new world order. So, in conclusion, ladies and gentlemen, a new world is emerging. It is a new world order with significantly different and radically new challenges for the future.
And people better understand that they mean exactly what they're saying. It's a new world order they're trying to create, and they're trying to do so not only without approval or consent of the government in this country, but despite the popular will. This is a straightforward assault by the elitists in this country.
There is a global meltdown coming. It is a global depression, and one world currency and one world financial system is the end game. China said last week they want one global currency. France said yesterday or the day before that they want one world order, a new world order, at the end of this event.
Gordon Brown will today call on fellow world leaders to seize the opportunity created by the worldwide economic crisis to create a truly global society. The Prime Minister will use a high-profile speech in the City of London to say that Britain, the US and Europe should join together to create a new, stronger and more just world order.
This engineered collapse is there as a massive problem for which you offer the solution, and the solutions are the infrastructure we've been predicting all this time, including the World Central Bank.
The goal of this manipulation, and has been for a very long time, is to get the world's population to see as a good idea, or the only option in given circumstances that are manipulated into place, the creation of a one world government, a world central bank which would administer all financial transactions on the planet, a world currency, and a microchipped population linked to a global computer.
The wealthy elite who have the money and the power know that if they can create a one world global social system, that they can control the central authority. In other words, world control, world domination. One of the oldest desires in the history of the world.
There's a very, very clear-cut and easily identifiable system in place that puts all of these elements, from media control to government control to energy control, together into one apparatus working together effectively towards its final goal, which is, global control.
Because of the compartmentalized pyramids that they've constructed within all these institutions of government and finance and corporations, the vast majority of people who are daily making contributions to push the world in this towards this Orwellian global state have no idea that they're doing that, because they don't know how their contributions fit in with everyone else's. Only the few at the top do.
Most people don't have a clue that unelected private bankers actually control the governments of the world.
There is this cozy little myth that is perpetuated between politicians and the media. The media report the world as if presidents and prime ministers are the final arbiters and decision makers in the world, which means that the people above the level of presidents and prime ministers that really make the decisions, they're never looked at or exposed by the mainstream media because they're not accepted to exist.
The central bankers of the world are working together to create a one-world government. The global police state is sinister as anything George Orwell ever wrote about. Where every person on the planet Earth will have an RFID chip implanted.
It is the first implantable microchip for humans that has multiple security, financial, and healthcare applications.
More than 100 law enforcement officials in Mexico are having microchips implanted in their arms. The chips allow a person to be scanned, sort of like a cereal box at the supermarket.
Just like the microchips implanted in the necks of dogs and cats, allowing lost pets to be identified, this glass capsule can do the same for humans.
A chip in everybody would be the universal monetary system par excellence, because there'd be no escape from it, and you'd be totally under the control of those who issue the electronic impulses in that chip.
The problem throughout human society is that the good men and women do nothing. They don't want power. They don't want control. They want to lead a leisurely life. They want to spend time with their family. They want to lead simple lives. But we are forced throughout society, throughout history, and throughout human time to stand up against bullies. And many times we stand up before it's too late. And we reverse the course of tyranny. But more often than not, we don't stand up in time, and horrible things have to happen first, so decadent societies learn why liberty and freedom is so precious.
If you think you don't like the situation now, then think what you're going to face a little way down the road. And more than anything, think of what your children are going to have to face. Because you think that we live in a controlled society now, this is nothing compared with what they are going to have to live in. So in terms of parents who are listening to this information, I would say this: go and look your children in the eyes and tell them that you can't be bothered, or you're too frightened to do anything about it. You're too frightened to get involved, too frightened to get involved in being another conduit for getting this information further and further expanded into the public mind, that you're too frightened to get together with others to stop cooperating with this system and to not be intimidated into coming into line, which is a bit like coming into line in a concentration camp and thinking it will be okay. As long as you stay in line and you do as you're told, you'll be fine. And then you realize at the end of it, well, actually, it ain't fine. And if you'd have all rebelled earlier, then you wouldn't be in the situation you're facing now. The point of mathematics alone ought to let us see where the real power is here. There are billions of people, 6 billion, nearly getting on for 7 billion on this planet, who are being manipulated. There are, in full knowledge of what they're doing, a relative handful of those who are doing the manipulating to the end that we're talking about.
They think they've beaten us. They think that they're going to have their way with us. And I'm here to tell them they're not going to have their way with us. We are going to defeat them.
You guys aren't going to be able to get away with your New World Order, sir. Talk about Bill. You know what New World Order is.
You will never get a New World Order. Never. National sovereignty will prevail. The New World Order is going down, sir. You can laugh. Wake up, people. Wake up. Research the New World Order. This is important. Look it up. Investigate it.
Your New World Order will fall. Humanity will defeat you.
The Council of Foreign Relations was founded during the First World War, when a university fraternity presented President Woodrow Wilson with a set of proposals that detailed options to reinforce world democracy when Kaiser Wilhelm II was eventually defeated. The proposals were backed by Colonel Edward Mandell House, advisor to President Wilson. Wilson presented the project to Congress in January 1918, where it was approved. And the CFR was officially founded in 1921. Its first sponsors were members of the most powerful families in the US: Rockefeller, Mellon, Harriman, Schiff, Kuhn, Loeb, and Carnegie. It was also backed by important foreign citizens, including multimillionaire South African colonizer Sir Cecil Rhodes, and European bankers Warburg and Rothschild. According to its critics, the domination strategy of the CFR is to control both sides of conflicts, and its ultimate goal, the creation of a private world government that would run countries as corporations. To achieve this, it would first have to erode the political structures of all sovereign states. Then it would have to foster worldwide socio-cultural standardization. And finally, it would have to impose a globalized financial system that it could control. Critics add that all of this would be achieved by provoking global conflicts that would keep the masses united against real or imaginary common enemies. Any similarity with reality is surely pure coincidence.
We destroyed every silo for grain or anything else storing food in the whole country. We destroyed all the storage and processing of food plants throughout the country. Even dates, the world's biggest exporter of dates. Famous processing and packaging plants in Baghdad, deliberately destroyed. We didn't want them to be able to feed themselves for a long, long time. We're all aware of the famous little powdered milk plant.
The United States government says that in this factory here you are making chemical weapons. Is that true?
No, that's not true. They are lying. Because this is milk for children. This powder, milk of children.
Nothing else was made, only this in the factory?
Yes, and you can see it yourself.
With the only factory in the Middle East to produce powdered milk, they were producing about 17% of their powdered milk requirements. We destroyed that, cut off all the milk. The malnutrition of the mothers immediately jeopardized all of the infants. 70% of the pregnant women, even today in Iraq, suffer anemia.
The death rate for children has soared compared to 1989, the last year before sanctions. One of the biggest causes of death in Iraqi children today is diarrhea and dysentery due to the untreated drinking water. Iraq's water purification plants were heavily bombed in the war, and many that were repaired have broken down. The United Nations bans the import of spare parts and chlorine into Iraq to purify water. We saw the effects of this policy in the hospitals.
This is the second attack form of acute bloody diarrhea, anemic dysentery. Most of them are due to contamination of water. He is malnourished, anemic, underweight with a developmental delay.
Diarrhea and vomiting. Do you have tap water there?
No.
You see the conditions of these children shouldn't happen anywhere, and it's caused by the sanctions the United States government insists upon.
The year is 1917, and Representative Oscar Callaway enters a disturbing statement into the U.S. Congressional Record. The statement reveals why J.P. Morgan interests hired 12 high-ranking news managers. The 12 were asked to determine the most influential newspapers in America. They were to figure out how many news organizations it would take to control generally the policy of the daily press of the United States. The 12 found it was only necessary to purchase the control of 25 of the greatest papers. An agreement was reached. The policy of the papers was bought, and an editor was placed at each paper to ensure that all published information was in keeping with the new policy. Soon, that policy would be defined by a front group formed by J.P. Morgan and his colleagues. In fact, Morgan's personal attorney was founding president of the organization, the Council on Foreign Relations. Today, the CFR maintains that its goal is to increase America's understanding of the world. However, the actual objective of this highly exclusive club is revealed by the rare admissions of the insiders themselves. In the early 60s, a Georgetown University professor collects information for a book favorable to the network of powerful men who founded the CFR. For 2 years, Professor Carroll Quigley is allowed to examine the confidential papers and secret records of this network. Quigley reveals that these men aim to create a world system of financial control in private hands, able to dominate the political system of each country and the economy of the world as a whole. In short, they seek total and quiet control of the entire world. And the CFR is their most visible conduit for carrying out that agenda. CFR members include America's wealthiest tycoons, as well as the highly placed elite in government, academic institutions, tax-exempt foundations, and the establishment media. Ruling Class Journalists, written by Richard Harwood, describes the CFR membership as the ruling establishment in the United States. The Washington Post article boasted that news reporters who are CFR members do not merely analyze and interpret foreign policy for the United States, they help make it. Who are these policymakers? Many of their faces are familiar. NBC's Tom Brokaw, CBS's Dan Rather, ABC's Barbara Walters, Jim Lehrer of PBS, William F. Buckley of National Review, media mogul Rupert Murdoch, owner of the giant multifaceted News Corporation. These media heavyweights, and many others like them, are members of the CFR. Powerful corporations are also invited to become members. At the close of the 20th century, CFR influence presided over far-reaching consolidations of media control. In 1995, CFR members Michael Eisner of Disney and ABC's Thomas Murphy merged their media empires. Soon after the merger, the Disney-ABC empire becomes a CFR corporate member. In the year 2000, the world's largest internet service provider, America Online, joins forces with Time Warner, one of the world's largest news organizations. The CEOs favoring the move are CNN's Thomas Johnson and Time Warner's Gerald Levin, both CFR members. Once again, another media giant is created under the shadow of CFR influence. Today, an elite handful of individuals define the agendas that are supported by the empire of establishment news.
This is a public service announcement. Red alert. Red alert. All 6 media corporations, Time Warner, Disney, Viacom, News Corporation, CBS Corporation, and Comcast, have one thing in common. The executives who run them belong to an international crime syndicate whose American branch is the Council on Foreign Relations. The CFR was founded in 1921 by David Rockefeller, the son of the Rockefeller banking and oil dynasty. Carroll Quigley, mentor to Bill Clinton, said in his book Tragedy and Hope, the CFR is the American branch of a society which originated in England and which believes that national boundaries should be obliterated and a one-world rule established. Although media seems to be biased, either being conservative or Democrat, the men who own these media corporations care nothing about these political parties. The job of these corporations is to keep the people divided on social issues while telling the masses of people globalization, a one-world order, and illegal foreign wars of aggression are all necessary and for your benefit. Time Warner CEO Jeffrey Bukes, CFR member. John S. Chen, Board of Director of the Walt Disney Company, CFR member. George Soros, financier of Media Matters, CFR member. Rupert Murdoch, CEO of News Corp, CFR member. Leslie Stahl, co-editor of 60 Minutes, CFR member. Brian Williams, NBC anchor, CFR member. Be sure to call the Satanic Council on Foreign Relations and verify what has just been told to you.
Among CFR's most renowned members are David Rockefeller, Henry Kissinger, Bill Clinton, former Secretary of State Madeleine Albright, Hungarian-American billionaire George Soros, Supreme Court Judge Stephen Breyer, Low CBS Network's President Lawrence A. Tisch, former U.S. Secretary of State General Colin Powell, General Electric's former chairman and CEO Jack Welch, current U.S. Secretary of State Condoleezza Rice, W. Thomas Johnson, President of CNN, and Katharine Graham, President of the Washington Post, Newsweek, International Herald Tribune Group. That's not to mention Alan Welsh Dulles, founding father of the CIA, and banker Paul Moritz Warburg, who was born in Germany and emigrated to the United States, where in 1913 he drew up and promoted the legislation that would create the Federal Reserve Bank. This is the American Central Bank, whose capital is not public, as would normally be expected, but is instead in the hands of private banks. Both the IMF and the World Bank have come in for some heavy criticism over many years for their lousy management of world crises, when instead of acting like last resort moneylenders, as their mission states, they became involved in dictating the macroeconomic policies of deeply indebted nations. drowning them in more and more debt. This policy had catastrophic results for countries such as Brazil, Argentina, Turkey, and Mexico. Joseph Stiglitz, Nobel laureate for economics, has repeatedly attacked the performance of the fund, suggesting that it was the true cause of many of the aforementioned crises. This cannot be brushed off as hearsay, since Stiglitz was chief economist and senior vice president of the World Bank from 1997 to 2000. In other words, an insider.
It came about because the bankers, this has been a fight throughout history. I mean, Andrew Jackson fought the fight, Thomas Jefferson fought the fight. You know, the bankers have always wanted to control the country because they're very clever and very smart people. And they knew that if they could ever get the government to give them the right to issue the money, they would control the government. They would control the laws of the nation. That's why even today, you look at the immigration laws. You look what's happening with immigration in America. Why is it happening? On one hand, people say we've had this 9/11 attack, and we have to get ID cards for people, RFID chips. Everybody has to be identified. They have to go to the airport. They have to be searched. Right. Everything is, we got security's foremost in everybody's mind, right? But on the other hand, I know if I were the president and 9/11 came, the first thing I would do was shut off the borders so nobody can come in there. So on one hand, they're telling Americans they have to be controlled with ID cards and RFID chips and wanting to chip people. And on the other hand, they're letting everybody come into the border. Terrorists, whoever wants to come in, can just walk over the border and come into the country. So you know it's a lie. It's not about terrorism. It's about the banks controlling the country and the world, working together. This is about the bankers wanting a one world government without borders. That's why everybody's able to come through the borders. It's not about security at all. And so the situation we're facing today is we have a government that's controlled by the Federal Reserve System, and the Federal Reserve System has this appearance of credibility, and Alan Greenspan's the greatest guy in the world, and now Bernanke, you know, and all these guys, oh, the Federal Reserve, you got to have the Federal Reserve. But in reality, the Federal Reserve is part of the Communist Manifesto. They talk about America having, being a capitalistic society, you know, but yet you have a central bank that makes all the decisions. That's not capitalism. No, it's a fraud. It's a lie. They deceive the people, and they put out all this spin, all this press. You know, the Federal Reserve is the greatest thing in the world, and they're going to protect us, and they're going to make sure there's no more depressions in this country. What they've done is destroy the currency of this country, and they've taken all our gold while destroying the currency. And at some point, they're going to probably pull the plug and create the Great Depression. You know.
And we're talking. You have to get rid of corporate America. You have to get rid of the power that they have. You have to greatly control every transaction and what's going on there. And basically, you have to make them impotent. Because as long as they have the power, they're going to continue to exploit and manipulate the working class. All the cops are, they're just workers for the 1%, and they don't even realize they're being exploited.
What kind of relationship do you have with the cops? Or do they see you as being one of them, or
they're trying to get me arrested?
They're trying to get you
arrested.
And
I may disappear. Okay, but as soon as I'm not going to go to prison. But as soon as I'm let out of jail, I'll be right back here, and they'll have to arrest me again.
And is it happened to all of us?
To be allowed to join the select 4,200 members the CFR has today, it is mandatory to be American, or to be about to obtain American citizenship. The council is loaded with top executives of financial institutions, powerful industry leaders, and mass media executives. Academics and scholars, high-ranking military personnel, politicians, public officers, deans of universities, and research centers are also welcome. The idea of a world dominated by private corporations, led by the CFR, might sound nonsensical. These corporations have a joint turnover that is almost twice the GDP of the United States, and employ more than 25 million people in the United States alone. Their power is surely already strong enough to twist some political arms worldwide. Perhaps the CFR is just an innocent think tank, like its members say it is. One thing is certain: the undeniable and enormous power wielded by such a group of influential people, for better or for worse.
Like the buzz in Great Britain. But your law is not one eye.
Thank you, Mr. President. The Commission have recently replied to my written question confirming that Commissioners Almunia and Kroes attended the Bilderberg meetings in June. The Commission cannot tell me details of what was discussed, but assure me that the Bilderberg meetings do not take decisions. If Bilderberg meetings are just talking shops, why do the most important and powerful figures from around the world, including George Osborne, the Chancellor of the Exchequer, bother to attend? And what other summit of world leaders in politics, finance and business would go completely unreported in the mainstream media, such as the BBC? It is impossible not to reach the conclusion that the non-reporting of these events is anything other than a conspiracy between the organisers and the media. It merely confirms the belief of many that the hidden agenda and purpose of the Bilderberg Group is to bring about undemocratic world government. It's a disgrace that the European Commission is colluding in that.
The Bilderberg Group is named after the Bilderberg Hotel in Oosterbeek, Holland, where it first met. Its founders were Joseph Rettinger, a Polish emigre with social democratic ideas, and Prince Bernhard of the Netherlands. The annual meetings that it has held since then have been regarded as true milestones in international politics. For the occasion, each country sends 2 guests, one of whom is conservative, the other liberal. According to Prince Bernhard, the group was created as an entity destined to fortify the North Atlantic Unit, to stop Soviet expansionism, and to promote cooperation and the economic development of the countries of the West. The venue, the agenda, and the participants are not secret. What remains undisclosed, however, are the topics discussed, since the meeting is held behind closed doors, and no detailed reports are published. The conference takes place during a weekend in May, and lasts 3 full days, usually a few weeks before the G8's annual meeting. A fleet of black limousines drives the guests to a luxury hotel or palace of choice. Security is tight and includes members of the attending countries' secret services. Past and present participants of the Bilderberg Group include the CEOs of France Telecom, Coca-Cola, Danone, Heineken, JP Morgan Chase, high-ranking British, American and European officials and cabinet members, and the editors of newspapers such as El País, La Repubblica, Le Figaro, the New York Times, Die Zeit, and the Wall Street Journal, among others. The items on the Bilderberg agenda vary very little from meeting to meeting. A state-of-the-world analysis, discussions on security in the West, debates on economic and political trends in the developed countries, as well as discussions on nuclear energy and lately biotechnology. Other famous guests at the group's meetings have included Giovanni Agnelli, then president of Italy's Fiat auto giant, and Henry Kissinger. Bill Clinton, Tony Blair, and Angela Merkel attended before assuming public office, as did Kofi Annan, the former Secretary General of the UN. Annan was married to Raoul Wallenberg's niece. Wallenberg, as we stated before, is the patriarch of the powerful Swedish family that has supported the group from its very beginning. Other participants have included Henry Ford II, Georges Pompidou, Helmut Schmidt, and Baron Edmund de Rothschild, together with the father of the American atomic bomb, J. Robert Oppenheimer. More names follow: Donald Rumsfeld, Alan Greenspan, George Soros, David Rockefeller, Queen Beatrice of the Netherlands, and US Senator and former presidential candidate John Kerry. The list, while incomplete, represents the greatest amount of economic and political power ever concentrated in one single organization. Something must replace governments, and it seems to me that private power is the adequate entity to do it.
Half-century, an elite organization called the Bilderberg Group has met annually all around the world in total secrecy, behind closed doors and with no official press coverage. It started in 1954 when the world's most powerful people joined forces in the Netherlands at Hotel Bilderberg, where Prince Bernhard, a former Nazi party member, was integral in its formation. Last year it was in Zurich, Switzerland. It was believed that the group discussed how to handle the Arab Spring at that conference. And this year they're meeting in the wealthy city of Chantilly, Virginia, right next to Washington, D.C. The group is comprised of 130 or so of the world's top elites in politics, banking, food, oil, media, and national defense. Some of the most notable attendees have been Ben Bernanke, Bill Clinton, Timothy Geithner, Bill Gates, Tony Blair, and Colin Powell. Others include Queen Beatrix of the Netherlands, Prince Charles, George Soros, and Alan Greenspan. Henry Kissinger and David Rockefeller are integrally involved as members of the Bilderberg Steering Committee, which is responsible for carefully crafting who will be attending the meetings every year. Some have called the Bilderberg Group a harmless think tank or just a discussion group, but people who've been following it for years say there's something much more sinister at the root. They claim that the group gets together to plan world policy for a new world order of global domination at the subjugation of the rest of humanity. Unfortunately, you won't hear much of a peep about the group's dealings or even the existence of it on the corporate media. This could be because the media moguls that have attended are sworn to secrecy. Check out what Rockefeller has said about the media coverage of Bilderberg. In his memoirs, multi-billionaire David Rockefeller said, quote, "Some even believe we're part of a secret cabal working against the best interests of the United States, characterizing my family and me as internationalists, and of conspiring with others around the world to build a much more integrated global political and economic structure. One world, if you will. And if that's the charge, I stand guilty, and I'm proud of it." He also allegedly said that he's grateful to media outlets like the Washington Post, the New York Times, whose magazine directors have attended their meetings and promised to keep it discretionary for almost 40 years, saying it would have been impossible for the group to develop its plan for the new world if it would have been subject to the lights of publicity during all those years. And while the public might not know exactly what's going on there, many people agree that the people who attend the meetings are the world's most powerful movers and shakers. Just take a look at this Drudge poll. It's a poll conducted to ask people what they really think of the Bilderberg conference. Over half of the people that polled said that the people who attend the conference are the real power masters of the world. 14% say they think it's just a false conspiracy theory, and 35% say it's a little bit of both. Nonetheless, the secret meeting is definitely coming more and more into the public eye, whether the participants want it to or not. Meanwhile, while Bilderberg attendees were questioned by independent journalists about what really goes on there, they completely skirt the issue or even deny having attended in some instances. So what is really going on in these meetings? Well, all weekend I'll be in Chantilly, Virginia, covering the Bilderberg Group to see if we can get a scoop about what the people there are thinking. thousands are expected to protest, and they'll be there in protest at the conference.
They're a bunch of criminals. They're a bunch of criminals. They've taken over our government. He who makes the money makes the rules. And because these guys make the money...
It's the old golden rule.
It's the old golden rule. Yeah. And because these guys make the money, they control our government, both the Democrats and the Republicans. And it doesn't matter whether Hillary Clinton's in office or George Bush is in office, the same things are going to happen. There are minor differences, but essentially the same thing is going to happen. Well, you should be frightened because these people are controlling our lives. You know, we're no longer in charge of our own lives. Everything we do today is done by... It's like believing in a sense that America from the beginning was supposed to be a democracy. You keep hearing...
It's a republic.
Of course it's a republic. Sure. It's a constitutional republic.
Absolutely.
Right? And if you ask 100 people on the street, what form of government is America supposed to be?
We have a democracy.
98% will tell you it's a democracy.
It's not.
And they don't get this. A democracy, 51% control 49%. It's tyranny of the majority. I wouldn't want to be part of the 49%. In our constitutional republic, 99% of the people couldn't take away the rights of 1%. You have rights because you were born. You had God-given human rights. They're your rights.
Intrinsic rights as a citizen.
Intrinsic rights. And the government can't take them away. You must understand something. We did not go to Iraq to bring freedom to Iraq. We're in Iraq, and we keep talking about promoting democracy. What we're promoting is a one-world government, a new world order. When they use the word democracy, just take that word democracy out and put in New World Order, One World Order, globalization. Put in any of those words in place of democracy. That's what it's about.
But what does
they use democracy as a spin word because you think we are a democracy and democracy equates to freedom. Democracy does not equate to freedom. Understand that.
And it's the same as the elections, the both can.
Exactly. You got it.
What's the ultimate aim? And what does it look like when they get there? If what you say is true and what others say is true, and there's many, many people that believe as you believe, I'm sure you know that, what does it look like when they get there?
Well, I can tell you, I was friends with one of the Rockefeller family, okay? And they were very much behind the Federal Reserve System, the banking, the Council on Foreign Relations, and we were very good friends. And he told me that what they really want to do is have a one-world government without borders. First you have the European Union, the European Constitution,
the EU.
which the European people voted down, by the way, but they're doing it anyway.
Yeah.
Now they want the North American Union.
Currency.
Right. Then they have the one currency. Now they want to do
they have
the
their own standing army.
Yep. But now they want a North American Union.
Yeah.
And then what they want to do is bring everybody together under one.
The Amero is there.
The Amero, the currency, exactly.
I didn't know it is there.
And so their plan is to have a government for the world. They want to do it through the UN. Right? And have everybody on this earth implanted with an RFID chip.
Do you believe that?
I know that. Then you hear the congressman, the senator, asking the Supreme Court justice how he's going to rule on that in my clip? You think he asked them for no reason? They're already implanting people with chips. The national ID card, which becomes law by May 2008, it's going to have an RFID chip in it. Okay, everything is done in stages. After the RFID chip goes in the card and in your passport, it's going to go into your body. That's what they're going to try and do. There's no question about it. And they're not going to do it through law. They're going to do it because you won't be able to live without it. All your money is going to be in that chip. I think Waco is my tipping point. When I saw what happened to Waco, I said, I'm going full-fledged. This is disgusting. They killed all those people for no reason. There was no need for those people to die and to be killed in that fire and burned to death. That was the most disgusting event. The war in Iraq, a disgusting event. When I heard Rumsfeld talking about shock and awe, let's everybody go home, watch on television shock and awe, as if it was a 4th of July fireworks. There are people under that concrete being killed and maimed, children and women and men dying for no reason. For no reason. You know? I had a friend, one of the Rockefellers, he said to me, Aaron, what do you think women's liberation was about? And I said, I think I had conventional thinking. And I said, I think it was about women having equal right to work with men, equal pay, you know. He said, you know what, Aaron, you're an idiot. And he started to laugh at me. I said, what do you mean? He said, you want to know what that was about? I said, tell me. He said, we, the Rockefeller Foundation, financed that women's lib movement. You want to know why? For 2 reasons. Half the population wasn't taxable before. And the second reason is, now the kids go to our schools at an early age, and we mold them. There's no more family at home to take care of the kids. The state becomes the family now, Aaron. You get it? And that's how this country is working. It's run by evil.
It's run by evil forces, and people in this country better wake up to the truth and save this country from what's happening.
David Rockefeller, also a member of the CFR, requested that his fellow Bilderberg members include Japanese representatives in the group, but the idea was turned down. He then created the Trilateral Commission, which compromises annual private meetings of some 350 people. Again, top businessmen and corporation executives, media moguls, politicians, and non-governmental organizations. At this time, including the Japanese. The idea was to create a trialogue involving Asia, America, and Europe. US President Jimmy Carter was present at several of its meetings. What the Trilateral is really up to is the creation of a world economic power, exceeding the political government of the nations involved. As managers and creators of the system, they will govern the world. During the 1980 presidential campaign, Ronald Reagan attacked Jimmy Carter by saying that there were 19 trilateralists, including Carter himself, in the administration. Reagan pledged that if he were elected president, he would not stop until he had exposed all of the secrets of the Trilateral Commission. But when Reagan finally became president, he included in his government 28 members of the CFR, 10 Bilderbergers, and at least 10 trilateralists. His vice president was none other than trilateralist George H. Bush. Perhaps that is what President George H. Bush was talking about when, after the Gulf War in 1991, he spoke of a new world order.
What is at stake is more than one small country. It is a big idea, a new world order, where diverse nations are drawn together in common cause to achieve the universal aspirations of mankind.
What is clearly undeniable is that the most powerful people in the world are indeed accustomed to belonging to one secret society or another. Currently, there are 3 societies that seem to have a monopoly on influencing global policy from behind the scenes. Skull and Bones, the Council of Foreign Relations, and the Bilderberg Group. According to their critics, they're not different organizations, but the 3 heads of the same monster that is dead set on dominating the world through control of labor, capital, and land.
It's a beginning of a global governance. It was easier, as I said, because of the crisis. And if something has been understood by the layman during this crisis, is that globalization is no more only a topic for lectures and conferences. That's a reality. We need this. And I think everybody had clearly understood that now it's impossible to find a domestic solution to global problem. We're entering now the second phase of this attempt to build some global governance.
Maybe in layman's terms, this is one part of the government lending another part of the government money, which would not lead to long-term confidence once the American people understood the basics a little bit better.
Well, it should be added that we also have a funding cost, and as interest rates go up, we'll have a liability cost as well as an asset cost, so it may or may not be a return to the Treasury.
I just might say that it's possible for a country to have a currency without a $1 trillion debt.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah.
So, again, this is, at the level of global governance, something which I trust is of utmost importance. And I would say that we owe this transformation, which again has been prepared. It was overdue that these economies that were obviously systemic at the global level would have a full ownership of this global governance. We have now shipped the baton. The baton is in the hands of a grouping of countries.
It is effectively a bankruptcy of this market fundamentalist belief, and we just have to recognize that something went very wrong, and we need to reformulate our view of how financial markets work. And unless we arrest it, you have a snowball effect. And as you know, the further it goes, the bigger it gets. Financial protectionism, trade protectionism, and a breakdown of the global economy.
This is not only about the Fed, this is about the Bank of England, this is about the Banque Centrale Européenne, European Central Bank, where you got the assets that have gone up, not through sound instruments, but through the files that banks cannot recover anymore.
You mean after Building 7 exploded on 9/11, they can't get the records anymore? How convenient.
It's the whole world system that has to be revalued, and now the system has to be reconstructed on sound basis. I agree with you on accountability, I agree with you on transparency, but this cannot be done only leaving the Wall Street and the Senate and Capitol Hill alone. We need to solve it together. The world, Europe has a role to play, the emergents have a role to play.
Federal Reserve Bank, Bank of England, European Central Bank, they all report to Bank of International Settlements in Switzerland. And that's another black box. And that's another highly corrupt institution. And again, they're thriving in the darkness of non-accountability and non-transparency.
The New York Stock Exchange, once the very center of global capitalism, is now part of a $25 billion proposed merger that would give a German company majority ownership of America's most famous financial institution. The planned merger with Frankfurt's Deutsche Börse Stock Exchange is symbolic of New York City's fading dominance on the world stage.
In this new world, such dangerous currents have swept along faster than our efforts to contain them. And that is why we cannot afford to be divided. No one nation, no matter how large or powerful, can defeat such challenges alone. None of us can deny these threats or escape responsibility in meeting them. In this new century, Americans and Europeans alike will be required to do more, not less. Partnership and cooperation among nations is not a choice. It is the only way, the one way.
The IMF and the EU Commission and the European Central Bank are not in Dublin today as friends of the Irish people. They are here to enforce the writ of the financial markets. They are here at the beck and call of the big bankers, the bondholders, the hedge fund operators, who are dictating the policies in Europe at the present time for the simple purpose of getting back the tens of billions of bad debts that they gamble on Irish developers and Irish bankers. And we are saying that the Irish working class, working people, poor people, pensioners, unemployed, should not pay a cent towards those bad debts.
EU leaders meeting in Brussels have agreed to set up a, quote, permanent mechanism to save Eurozone economies sinking in debt. They promise to do whatever is required to safeguard the common currency.
Now, this summit is happening on the backdrop of a lot of discontent across Europe. We've just seen protests in Greece get violent against the austerity measures. We've seen a couple of months ago the French coming out into the streets protesting the rise in the retirement age by 2 years. We've also seen protests in London of students because the government has been passing plans to pass the tuition fees on to students. Now, across Europe, there's this feeling of discontent, but also a sense of unfairness. There's a feeling that the middle and lower classes are shouldering the burden of the financial crisis, which has been dragging on for a couple of years now, while the small percentage that owns much of the wealth here in Europe are not feeling the pain of the austerity measures.
You must leave. No matter what your purpose is, illegal munitions could cause risk of injury to those who remain. The police action may include actual physical removal, the use of riot control to those who remain. I hereby declare this to be an unlawful assembly.
Since the Industrial Revolution, we will see a fascinating sequence of events unfolding that seem to prove the conspiracy theory, or at least provide major arguments for it. First, the ever-increasing concentration of cash and other resources in a few private hands, such as banks and gigantic multinational corporations. Corporations whose revenues are equivalent to the GDPs of entire countries, and whose mere survival demands more and more profits year after year, no matter the social cost. Second, the creation of public multilateral control organizations that are actually nothing but the public arm of powerful private interests. These organizations include the American Federal Reserve, the World Bank, and the IMF. Third, the undeniable advance of the process known as privatization. That is, taking non-renewable natural resources, communication infrastructures, heavy industries, as well as defense, health, and banking systems out of the hands of the people and delivering them into the clutches of profit-hungry private corporations. Fourth, the phenomenon of cultural and financial globalization that in truth amounts to little more than the imposition of a dominant cultural and economic system upon those of peripheral countries. Fifth, the creation of worldwide conflicts and stereotypical enemies to manipulate public opinion and destroy any possibility of discussion or dissent, leading to the actual loss of many of the most elementary democratic rights. The US Patriot Act of 2001 is a good example of this. When panic attacks, people tend to accept more and more control. Finally, and most interesting of all, that almost all of the key players of these events, those who are really taking the decisions and hold the true political and economic reins of the West by being in command of its capital, armed forces, or even votes, are coincidentally grouped in just a few societies that meet behind closed doors.